Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the Superintendent's webcast on COVID-19, March 27th, 2020. Thank you for joining us today. We want to devote the majority of this webcast today to question and answers from superintendents and others in our education community that may be watching. We will have on your screen, we will have a Go Soapbox. Right there it is. It's gosoapbox.com. The access code is KDECOVID for you to submit your questions. We also have some questions left over from last week that if we run out of the live questions, we will continue to answer those. We've heard that the last some good feedback last week that you got valuable information from this webcast in a question and answer format. We want to keep doing that. We are logging all these questions in a question and answer document on the KDE website. And speaking of the KDE website, we are relaunching the COVID-19 resources on a launch page that you'll hear about a little later in the webcast from Tony Cons-Tatman, our Director of Communications. We want to make sure that school districts, parents, families, and others have all the information in one page, and that will link to other pages regarding education issues related to COVID-19. Of course, you always need to make sure your community knows, your staff knows to access the main COVID-19 website that you see every night on Governor Beshear's webcast. So make sure you're also accessing that for the latest information on COVID-19 from the medical and public health perspective. I wanted to provide a few reminders, and then after that we're going to have Dr. Ellis talk to us a little bit about some issues that are surfacing regarding grading and those types of issues, and then also David Cook is going to speak to us about NTI and some issues that are bubbling up there. But I did want to provide some reminders. As you all know, the governor has asked all districts to close to in-person classes until April 20th. I want to thank all of you all and your boards for doing that. As I told a superintendent group this week, there are very few states where a governor could ask and recommend that all schools close, and they do so within 24 hours. And that's just, as I said before, just an example of who we are in Kentucky, and that we operate here as a family, as an education family. And so I want to thank you, and the governor really appreciates your cooperation during this time. I keep saying to plan on 6 weeks of NTI instruction from beginning March 16th, and that is still true. There are some districts that did not, there are a few districts that have not yet begun NTI because they are getting it up and rolling in their planning stages through their teachers and administrators, and that's okay as well. But just know that we need to be preparing for at least 6 weeks of NTI instruction starting March 16th. And as you know, I sent an email to all of you. This email is, you don't have to do anything else. You're granted 30 days of NTI permission beginning March 16th, and that is in addition to those of you who have already used up to 10 NTI days for other purposes before March 16th. So just know that every school district has been approved for 30 days. That email gives you the approval. Just keep that on file, and you've got it from us. We want to make that as easy as possible. You have 30 days of approval for NTI days beginning March 16th. The goal of which is we need to try to reach 1062 hours. That's what the General Assembly has asked us to do through Senate Bill 177 that was just passed this week and signed by the governor. The General Assembly is signaling to us that if it's all possible, they would like to see 1,062 hours of instruction in every school district on or before June 12th. And I know I've run a few numbers and gotten a few estimates from districts. The average district will be around 1,005 hours on May 1st if you've been doing NTI since March 16th. Other districts will be around, if you haven't, for example, Jefferson County is just now starting NTI, they may be in the 900s. And so it looks like to get to 1062, we would have to go into May. And just know that we are keeping an eye on that. We want to hear your feedback about, and that's one of the things the task force has been looking at that we formed on education continuation. What does NTI look like after we hit 6 weeks? Are we going to be able to continue delivering good instruction the 7th week, the 8th week, the 9th week that would, in many cases, get us to 1062? There are some districts that will hit around 1062 around May 1st. I talked to one district today, and they will hit it May 12th. So these are all things we need to be thinking about. We need to make sure we're providing our kids educational services, but we also need to recognize that this is we're doing something that NTI was really never designed to do, to go day to day, back week to week, back to back, without a reset, a personal reset in the classroom. And so we're asking you all to do a lot of things. We understand that. And we want to make sure we're hearing the concerns, but also we want to make sure that we strive to, and what the General Assembly said in Senate Bill 177 was maximize educational instruction on or before June 12th. So just know that we remain very open-minded about that at the department. We want to assist you. We want to hear from you. Your co-ops are all represented on the Education Continuation Task Force, so make sure as those issues are bubbling up for you and any challenges that you're voicing that to your co-op directors as well. As you know, the K-Prep exam was canceled. I issued an email canceling that this week. We have received tentative approval on our waiver request from US Ed to cancel our assessment this year and to postpone accountability as a result. I have not received formal approval, but I did not want to wait on that. I feel 99% sure we will be formally approved by US Ed for that. However, I wanted to take one thing off the table for students, families, teachers, and you and superintendents and administrators. I don't want you worrying about taking the K-Prep this year when we are trying to just deliver basic instruction to kids during these times. So you can check that off the list. Want to keep reminding you to keep feeding kids. I can't tell you how important that is. As you know, the governor has mentioned this on his daily press conferences, and we're seeing pictures of this through social media, also been referenced on the governor's press conference. I also want you to know we understand how hard it is to feed kids. It's easy for us to sit here in Frankfort and tell you to feed the kids. You all get it done, and there are very few complaints about it, but we also know it's a challenge. We also know your employees are doing so in an environment that they may not feel comfortable all the time, and the governor's recognized that as well, but has also indicated that that is actually a service in furtherance of public health, to keep kids healthy. And we know that our summer feeding program needs to be strong and robust through the summer, as it normally is, but particularly this summer as we may enter into an uncertain economic time in many of our families and communities. That's very important. I'm happy to report that there's only one county, I think to our calculations now, that are not where the kids are not receiving some type of food service from a school district. And that is incredible. That wasn't the case a few weeks ago. Many districts came on, or several districts came on to the summer feeding program when this crisis started. And if you're that one county, please call me. I won't name you, but we are more than willing to help you get started on summer feeding. It's so important, and particularly during this time. And we've just heard, and we see on social media the faces of the kids when they see the bus come up with food, and that is just needed in their community and gives them something to look forward to. So thank you all for what you're doing. I also had a video passed to me on a teacher parade that was disrupting the Lexington neighborhoods, and I think that's an amazing thing. As you all know, we have teachers going in their cars and going through neighborhoods where they know their kids live. And there's just a lot of creative things going on that you all are a part of and that you're allowing to happen, and I want to thank you for that. And then finally, I want to remind you of staying healthy at home. That is how we are doing it in Kentucky, and how Governor Beshear describes the need for us to stay socially distanced, provide social distancing, but the best place to be is at home. And I want to use that to encourage you that if you have individuals in your teachers or central office employees or others that can work from home, you should allow them to work from home. You're permitted to have folks if you need them to report into your building, but please always evaluate that on a day-to-day basis. And if you still have to have some staff come in, stagger those. Some of you have told me how you're doing that. For example, if you have a small central office in square footage, but you may have 10 or 15 employees, you're spreading them out. If you have to have some of them come in, or you're having them come in on alternating days, please continue to do that. It's very important. And then again, as the governor has said, and he said this to both public and private institutions, if you're able to work from home, please enable that. I also know that creates a hard conversation for those that you absolutely have to have come in, being cafeteria workers, custodians, janitorial staff, that we still need to keep our buildings safe and running and deep cleaning. And I know that is, you sometimes are feeling like we're saying two things, telling you to do two opposite things here at the state level. And just know that all of this is necessary. It's necessary to have some people in buildings to prepare food. It's also necessary to have as many people at home as possible. So please work with us on that. And most of you all are really doing a good job of that. I know it's a little bit, if you've never had folks telecommute, and most districts have not, it's sometimes hard to get your head around it. And some of your boards, I know, are trying to adjust to it as well. But please keep working with it. I will say that we are moving the Department of Education to full-time telecommuting beginning Monday. As most of you know, we've had a long history with telecommuting here at the department. When Dr. Holliday was here, he started a limited telecommuting program, and we've continued that over the years to around 50% on the most used day of telecommuting until recently, and we've really recently ramped that up. We've had a few test days over the last few days, and we've determined that we're still able to provide full services without disruption. If you call our main number, you will get Loretta, and you may hear a dog in the background. That's not a dog in the commissioner's office. That's probably the dog at her house. So that's just an example of how we're doing things differently, and want to make sure we're still providing services, but I'm also committed to keeping all KDE employees healthy at home as much as possible. So thank you all for working with us on that. We want to get to 3 short speakers, and then we're going to get into question and answers. The first, Kelly Foster and David Cook, regarding some NTI issues.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is Kelly. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
As Kevin mentioned earlier, with the passage of Senate Bill 177, we released the statement from the Commissioner's Office granting you the additional 30 NTI days from March the 16th until May the 1st. And so that message went out earlier this week. David Cook, one of the directors in my office, has been working very closely with you and your district point of contacts regarding NTI, offering guidance and updates. And so I've asked David to speak to you a little bit today about how everything has been going this week. And then, of course, we want to take your feedback and questions. So at this time, I'll turn it over to David.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. I first want to say how much I appreciate all the hard work all of you and your staffs have done during this process. It's been difficult, I know, on many levels, but I think we're getting into a rhythm on guidance and new information that we're giving out to you all. We have sent out 3 different guidance documents on 3 different days in a row with a lot of information, but I think that information has helped streamline and ease some of the questions that many people have. I'm getting ready to push the button on a 4th. As soon as I'm done talking to you all, that has not quite as much new information, but still is some stuff that folks have been asking a lot about. Most of the questions have been to date were about participation and documentation, and I think we've answered all of those. We're still reminding everybody of their obligation. That's even though we did an emergency waiver and emergency application for this process for COVID-19. Your applications are still obviously legally binding documents at this point for this period of time. And while we did waive some of the parts of the administrative regulation, we didn't waive all of them. And you all, in reviewing your applications do address both paper and digital information or opportunities for students to complete assignments. Because it does say, those applications do say that, it's actually not possible for you to require somebody to do digital work or to check in digitally if you have in fact in your application said you would provide another option. So there needs to be a phone option, some way for a student to call in, or some other mechanism beyond what they might normally do with their digital platforms. There's some additional SharePoint information in this next guidance that we're sending out in just a few minutes. I would remind you all that we did ask every superintendent to submit to us names for points of contact. Those districts who were already in TI districts, we already had those, of course, but we ask each of the new emergency districts to submit points of contact. And we have created our our distribution lists from those. We really don't need any additional people asking for access to SharePoint. The only thing you guys are populating in SharePoint is an Excel spreadsheet document that doesn't require a great deal of information. So it looks like a little bit like sometimes principals are asking for access as if they might have to put some information in themselves. But there really is only a district level student participation rate, a district level teacher participation rate, and that spreadsheet that we talked about. So it's probably better that one or two people have access to that and not quite a few more people. At this point, I think, like I said, we're, as Kelly said, we're chugging along as hard as it is. We are chugging along right now, and I think people are starting to get at least acclimated to some of the things we've shared with them about the information that we need from you all. If I'll take any questions if you have any.
Okay. Move on, because we'll go to the NTI questions.
We will take questions. If you have any related today, we'll just do those at the end or when we get to those in here in a few minutes. We're going to have Dr. Ellis. She's going to talk to us a little bit about some issues that are bubbling up regarding grading and questions of that sort.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Just to piggyback a little bit off of David and the questions we've also received in our office, as well as I'm sure his, is a lot about the big decisions you guys have to make as students take their spring break, and you guys are looking into the month of April, as Kevin had spoke about with the hours. And David had mentioned a little bit about new learning versus review and the decisions you all are making, and just really considering what you have in your plan, how students have access to their resources and help through a phone or text or online, whatever that outreach is, really has to be a district decision piece, and really be thoughtful about the equitable access, but that does not take away from the opportunity for learning experiences for all students. So it's really important that you guys think through those options. I know those are big decisions and another set of uncharted waters that you're going to have to navigate through to really figure out the capacities and how you've succeeded so far, really thinking about what's working well. How do you know? What do you need to address specifically in your process that may increase either the participation or the effectiveness of your process? Is something to consider, and access, and really thinking about how you're communicating with the families and the parents who are delivering this instruction or assisting you in the delivery of this. I know so many of you have a variety of ways, or a great hybrid of how you're integrating packets versus online, and how you're finding balance with that, and how I've heard so many great examples of how communities are even offering Wi-Fi access in their parking lots. That would be a safe way to offer that access. to really think through your longer term. Part of that also comes into grading and what is fair and what does KDE decide what a local, and we do not have the authority to determine whether to tell you to do pass, fail, or grades. I know some districts are considering doing a hybrid of elementary, middle, doing pass, fail this 9 weeks. High school is the big concern because of KEYS money. I will tell you, I reached out to Kia, and actually my point of contact literally called as this webcast was starting. So I'm supposed to have a phone call with her tomorrow or this afternoon as soon as this webcast is over to really talk about anything that Kia is thinking about in terms of KEYS money and what their authority is. That is completely really in their field of expertise, and I plan to really talk through some possible options so I can take that forward for discussion with the task force to come out with hopefully some viable options. We know that the learning setting for every kid right now is so different, and we don't want to punish students or overlook their work or their access or give favor to one over another. I know there's a lot of moral decisions on what's best for students, but we also don't want to harm them either of taking away scholarship dollars. And I've received several emails about that, about the fear of pass-fail for high school students really could impact the amount of money they are eligible for each year with KEYS. So stay tuned. I do have a call today with Kia, and we'll be in touch. But please know that there are great resources out there. You guys have some incredible, great minds, and hopefully you're networking with your other districts near and far. I know the co-ops are working tirelessly to get you access electronically to each other to really think through some possible solutions in this uncharted water. It's an opportunity for innovation we've never thought of before, but we certainly want it to ultimately benefit the students in this time. So if you have any questions, please shoot them through to Go Soapbox. We'll be happy to address those, and we'll be in touch with more information. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. And then we're going to now go to Tony Constapman, and she's going to give us a little bit of an update on the launch, the web page I mentioned, the new launch page for the COVID-19 issues, and then we will start our question and answer period.
All right. Well, the first thing I wanted to mention as we talk about NTI is to remember to use the hashtag. So there is a slide up there that we've created, both a Twitter account from the communications department and a Facebook account. And you'll see them up there right now. It's the hashtag MyNTIKY. And then we've also created the accounts up there. So as you can see, the latest tweet that we tweeted is actually, I don't know if Dr. Constant is on the line here, but congratulations. He was just named the new superintendent last night. Went from interim to superintendent. But there he was delivering some NTI packets. And it's a great way to share the work that you all are doing across the state. And that's exactly what we're looking to these accounts to do. So that was the first thing I wanted to show you, if you wanted to move to the next slide. I also wanted to give a shout out to some of the other ones. These are some examples. I know a lot of the questions that we're getting that are coming in are what are some things that we can do? You know, we have a lot of employees that are sitting at home and we're not really sure, you know, what can we do while we're social distancing? Well, these are some really great examples. There's been some wave parades. There's been a lot of interaction through Twitter, as you can see there on the right, you know, just looking at different ways on how to interact with each other. So it's very easy to do. I encourage you to look out and use social media right now because it's a very good way to see what your counterparts are doing across the state, across the country. We're all in this together. And there's a lot of really great examples out there of different things. I know you probably heard of the teddy bears that are in windows. They did the chalk the walk this week with the physical education teachers. There's just a lot of really great things going on, even with special education teachers that are going to houses and doing some instruction through windows there in Bullitt County. Lots of great things going on. So I just wanted to share a couple of those things. And again, make sure you tag us because we want to make sure we share all of these things with everybody else and show our families and everyone else in the Commonwealth what a great job you all are doing as you're implementing this work. And if you want to move to the next one. And then I don't know if she talked about the Education Continuation Task Force, but we can skip that one, sorry. This is going to be our new website. This is our new launch we've been working on. This is a sneak peek for you. It'll be launching later today. Just gives you an idea of, we're trying to make it very easy for you to be able to click on each link will take you to different, I'm calling them little buckets of information based on office. So if you're looking for information on feeding programs, you're basically going to be able to click, in two places. You're going to find feeding site by county that you can use right there. And then also, if you're looking for nursing information, you'll be able to go to that particular area and find it there. Any communications that come out of my department, you'll be able to find there. If there's any kind of legal questions, special education, we have a lot of questions about IEPs and our, everything is going to be departmentalized where you can find it, we hope, a lot easier than where it is now. And it'll all live on this one page as we move forward. And I think that might be my last one. I'm not sure if you want to go. Oh, yes. And then, of course, we updated the FAQs as well, which I think, from what I can see, there's about 78 of you in there right now. So I hope this is useful. There's about 100 questions. We've been working really hard to update these questions on the leadership team, to answer your questions, get them through our legal department, to really provide as much support and guidance to you with the questions that you have asked. These were either asked to us via email or through the text message. Some of them were even going back to when we were on the phone with the governor the first time. So we tried to log all of these questions like we do every single time, just to provide a really good way of providing feedback and getting answers to your questions. I promise we are listening, we are logging, and we're trying to provide the best information for you. And with that, I guess we can go on to today's questions, or do you want to add anything to that?
I would just say, Tony, thank you. Before you start, if you notice on the web page, there are 3 words to the side. It says educate, feed, and support. Those are guiding words that we are using here at the department to guide our work until we get through the COVID-19 period, which we will get through. But we are putting all of the other mission and vision on the side, and our guiding words are educate, feed, and support, meaning that we pledge to support you as you strive to educate the kids of Kentucky, and knowing that you're doing it in a very challenging environment. We strive to support you as you are feeding all kids around the state, and hopefully we'll be all kids here pretty soon. We're almost there. And 3, support you, meaning that we are going to flow funds to you as you expect, and then you are going to try to keep employees as whole as possible, and we're going to work with you on how to do that, meaning making sure we have creative opportunities and you are aware of those across the state to maybe provide some PD to a classified person, a paraprofessional that could possibly count as a contract day, as an example of how to continue to make employees whole. And then we're going to work with you at the end of the year to make sure that we can close all this out due to this using Senate Bill 177. We have some tools there to help get you employees across the finish line. And then also the governor has pledged that, as obviously the General Assembly could not think of everything before they adjourned, they put a lot of great things in Senate Bill 177. There will be other things that we need from them to help you after they go home on the April 15th, and the governor has pledged that he will do what he can and everything in his power through executive order to provide assistance. And as an example of what we're doing, we're gathering together due dates and other things that you would normally be responsible for in a school year, and we're going to be giving you guidance and in some cases providing you some relief through either waivers of the State Board of Education, or some things could come through an executive order. So all that's on our radar. As you see things that are popping up on your radar, make sure you're letting us know, just so we're not missing anything. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew what the guiding principles were here. And first and foremost is we're here to support you during this time. So Tony, I'll turn it over to you to start us out with questions.
Okay, so I have both computers up. One has the soapbox questions, and then I have a couple of people who submitted some questions prior to the meeting through the Google form, which you can still submit questions either way. So going to the Google form first, if we end the school year early, will people be able to work on spring break and count those days towards contract days rather than working a week longer when they could already have had it in the books?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Todd, do you?
I think they're wanting to know that if they can just cancel their spring break and count it towards,
They're going to
Instructional
continue providing
days.
instruction during that time.
right, count the days towards the contract days rather than working a week longer.
Right, we have advised districts that if they do want to adjust their calendar, and I heard from at least one district this week that they can ask their board to go, one district, for example, wanted to just say, let's just go ahead and do NTI through spring break, not have a spring break, and convert those over into contract days. That can be done. And then, of course, we had, the General Assembly has said through Senate Bill 177 that we have the school year, at least for students, should be, try to be finished by June 12th to get those 1062. We know technically the school year for employees goes through June 30. So there will be a time period there where we're trying to get folks caught up as far as employee contracts and things, and it may come into play using virtual PD and those types of things. So, and I just got a text from a superintendent saying, you know, I'm hearing a lot from, and in his district, he believes that May 1st is just kind of if you get in 6 weeks of a NTI by May 1st, you know, everybody's going to be exhausted, and just know we're looking at that. Right now, we want everybody to focus on getting in 6 weeks of NTI. We understand that things could change. We understand that the situation with the virus obviously can change from day to day, and if whether or not it spreads throughout the state could impact your ability to deliver, even though you're delivering services through non-traditional ways. So just know that we're looking at all those things, but we want to make sure we're looking forward and we're still planning on doing instruction. And if we have to adjust things midstream, we will. But right now, let's all focus on getting 6 weeks of instruction in through NTI, and let that be our focus. And then we'll start looking at how does that play out with the hours.
All right, well, that was one of the top questions on the soapbox was, well, and it kind of relates to that. May NTI days be counted as 420 minutes, which is 7 hours of instruction, as districts move towards the 1,062 instructional hour requirement?
They want to increase the number.
May NTI days be counted as 420 minutes, which is 7 hours of instruction, as the districts move forward towards their requirement of 1,062 hours.
And I think
of
Dr.
instruction.
Foster may have dealt with that issue, or David, this week already. So can you all chime in on that? Because I think that has to do with what the number of hours listed, your hour, your
Right.
length of day that was listed on your application, I believe. But David?
Yeah, it's basically, your district has a set number of hours and minutes that you've calculated for your district already. And that amount should be what you use on NTI days. So if it's 6 hours and 6.75 hours, that's what you would use for your NTI calculation. Whatever the number is that you had already calculated in your calendar. Because you created a calendar based on trying to get to 1,062 hours. So we're just saying that an NTI day is just like any other instructional day.
We have been hearing that KDE might mandate or strongly suggest a pass-fail grading system. Is there truth to this rumor?
Dr. Ellis, could you address that?
Yes, that's exactly what we were just talking about before. That is a district decision. That is up to them on what they think is fair. Consider how you have in your plan before, and even your revised NTI of how you are considering participation or completion, or however you are grading. The biggest concern, as we said earlier, if people weren't tuned in, is the grading in high school and the impact on keys. And as I shared earlier, I do have a phone call today with Kia to really talk through keys and impact to see if there's anything that would be different to that. If so, I will report that early next week as soon as I have that conversation. But it is not really for us to decide. It really is local, and depending on how you are administering your work and what your plan is, and considering all environments in which students are learning from. So that's really a local decision.
Commissioner, if I may, this is David Horseman.
Go ahead.
We were in a meeting today with CPE and some of the representatives from colleges. And, sorry, I didn't turn that on. KCTCS has taken the approach that they are doing, offering grades. They're not going to do pass-fail. And the reason they're doing that is they want to make sure that their courses are transferable. So I would caution the teachers that are doing dual credit to work with their local college that they have dual credit agreements with, to make sure that if they do pass fail, that may or may not work for the dual credit.
Thank you, David, for that clarification.
We have a couple of questions about how graduation should be handled. I'm going to try to summarize a couple of these up. There's larger districts that have to deal with securing facilities that can handle large capacity, and then just in terms of ordering adequate equipment and supplies.
I would love to tell you that we're going to see this, as if you watch the Governor every day at 5, which I would recommend everybody. It's become must-see TV. Watch the Governor every day at 5, and he talks about the curve. I would love to see that curve start going down in May or before in April, and then us miraculously get some kind of a order that says we can all go back, and we would get maybe 2 weeks in of school, and we could have graduation. But I think we all have to plan that for the occasion that won't happen. So it's hard to answer that question, because I assume there is a possibility that could happen, or maybe into the last part of May or early June, that things could ease up and we could start having events again. And I know that you don't want to. You want to know now, so you can either get out of contracts that you already have, or start dealing with that. And just to be frank, we don't really have the answer to that. One of the things that we talked about with the Commissioner Student Council was that very issue. Obviously, we have a lot of disappointment with our seniors and others because already there are senior events that have been missed that will never happen, and particularly those will increase as we get into the year. So, Dr. Ellis, do you have any other comments about graduation, other than it is a topic that we are discussing on as part of the task force?
Yeah, so as far as what we're looking at, we did talk with the student advisory the other day to also get their input, since most of them are seniors. But what we're looking at, and we'll get feedback from the task force on Monday and put recommendations out, is to really look at the minimum requirements is what we're going to propose, and for local boards to consider waiving the additional requirements. As you all probably are aware, especially after all this graduation talk in the past 2 or 3 years, it feels like the minimum requirements are 22 credits, especially for the seniors right now. But most districts require more. Some require additional courses. Some require whether they're transition ready, benchmarks, credentials, things like that. And we're recommending that the task force give us feedback on asking for the minimum requirements, and then even thinking about some unintended consequences on that. What are we missing? We're also talking with legal right now about the implications on early graduation, not hardship cases, but the early graduation program for that where students can demonstrate competency to graduate early. And so there are some hiccups with that clearly, since we still use the EOCs in that particular setup, which is paper pencil only. So stay tuned on that. We are working through that. Rhonda and the legal team and David Horstman and I are working on that closely for some options for consideration. So it is very much at the top of our list, and hopefully to have additional information early next week. We know that's a very hot topic, and our students, especially our seniors, are heavy on our minds with that. Thanks.
And in just getting back to the specific contract issue, that's graduation's a big issue, but the specific contract issue, if any of you have contracts with other venues, I would encourage you to talk to your board attorney to see if it might be appropriate right now to go ahead and have a conversation with that facility. As an example, when KHSAA had to postpone indefinitely the the boys and girls Sweet 16, the Lexington Center and Rupp Arena, they were great. We had to, the department cancel some events here, and for the most part, our interactions with hotels and other venues been very positive. They've been trying to do the right thing so that particularly governmental entities don't have a financial penalty. So you may want to, if you do already have a contract for an event space, you may talk to your board attorney to see how you may want to go ahead and talk to those venues about options and those types of things. I will say, I will put a challenge out there, and I think every state will be grappling with this. If we don't get back into school, it'd be great if some type of technology vendor or somebody would provide some kind of platform to look at virtual graduations or that some type of an event like that if we are not allowed to have an event as late as January or as late as June.
We understand district use of property forms, insurance, board approval, et cetera, but is there additional guidance on allowing drive-in church at our school facilities from either the governor or the department?
I'm going to let Todd answer this. I will say there are, I think, two issues that have to be answered. One is there's a potential church-state issue that you always have to be mindful of. And then there's also the issue of the public health issue. Even if you're gathering students in cars or gathering community members in cars, whether or not that does increase the likelihood of being together, that would go against what public health and the governor are recommending. And I think Todd may have dealt with this a little bit already.
Slightly. To address the church and state issues, as governmental entities, school districts cannot, advance or favor one religion over another. So while it's absolutely not barred that a church or that a school permit a church to do something like that, of course, all of the devil's always in the details and how you go about doing it. So how a school district would go about choosing the church that it allows to have services on Easter and how it goes about turning other churches down could get very interesting and open the school district to liability. Before a school district ever did that, I would recommend that you consult with your board attorney to determine how you're going to do that, what type of process you're going to have involved, if it is something you want to take on at all. The second portion that Kevin discussed as far as the social distancing goes, while it may sound good at first, depending on how long that service were to last, if it is warm, people begin getting out of their cars, congregating under shade trees, whatever the case may be, then we start to lose the social distancing efforts that we have worked so hard to maintain.
And if you'll notice, and this is mentioned almost every day in the governor's press conference, there's, even being too close together in a park is a problem. And so, these are issues that I think it's, I understand that there will be a need in communities to try to, particularly for Easter services, to try to have those and be as creative as possible. But I do, when schools are asked to be at least facilitate that through facility usage, you need to do exactly what Todd said: consult your board counsel about the church-state issue, and then you will need to talk to your local public health officials about that. And I do think it could cause problems.
Given upcoming non-renewal staffing deadlines and a very pessimistic state revenue forecast, what are recommendations from KDE about upcoming budget decisions?
Robin?
Well, I think the first place we should look is to Senate Bill 177. In this time of uncertainty, anything that we can do to help districts have more manage expectations on what might be coming forward, that's what we're trying to do. So in Senate Bill 177, and thinking about what your next year might look like, I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to walk through what would next year look like as you're considering decisions right now that would come into play next year. We don't have the crystal ball, but I will tell you we're trying every avenue to, as the commissioner has said on, to keep everyone as whole as possible, to do no harm, I guess is the best way to put it. So if we look at Senate Bill 177, that's a good place for you to start as you're thinking. Senate Bill 177, and I'm going to look at Section 11 specifically for right now as we talk about funding for next year. It contains provisions on how districts can kind of expect, short of something else happening, and I will preface that with that caveat because we all know that something else will likely happen. But this is for planning purposes right now. We know you're working on your budgets and you're working on your staffing. So for SEEK funding purposes for next school year, 2018-2019 data will be used to calculate end-of-year adjusted average daily attendance, that's AADA, and those other things that are in the SEEK formula that we use AADA. So that's at risk, home hospital, and SEEK transportation. We've heard a lot of things from districts concerned about their transportation dollars. And so this will help us at least have kind of a ground floor that we're looking at what funding will look like. Because we have other things in the SEEK appropriation that are unaffected and they don't rely upon average daily attendance, our best thinking right now is to use that 2019-2020 data to calculate funding. So that is your exceptional child count numbers, your English language learner counts, and of course, growth, fall growth and January growth will be calculated in the next school year at the appropriate times, meaning in the fall and then again in January. So that can kind of help you to see where SEEK might fall and look like going forward. The other things that we have to consider, there's lots of funding pieces of legislation that are now coming in front of us that we're all scrambling to read very quickly. I think everyone is thinking in a manner that districts will certainly need funding assistance, certainly. And so as we've seen through the I'm going to read just a little bit because it's kind of fresh off the plate, but the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, now known as CARES Act, was passed by the U.S. Senate on the 25th of March, and I think it's being considered by the House today. But this also is going to provide some funding relief for districts. I think there's been several summaries out that talk about the provisions of that act, but I will say there is significant relief allowed, and the allocation of those funds will come to the local school districts through these state agencies by a Title I formula allocation. So that is another form that funding will be coming your way as quickly as possible. The other thing that to get on your radars today is the possible, I will say possible, opportunity for assistance from FEMA. And FEMA, of course, tries to come to the aid of situations and locations that are suffering in a crisis, typically used in like ice storms or tornadoes or floods, but FEMA dollars will be available. And we will be pushing out as we learn more about this. I've actually invited a FEMA representative from our emergency management office here in Frankfurt to come and be present on one of our superintendent's calls so we can get some additional information to each of you as a potential applicant for FEMA dollars. Typically, FEMA doesn't substitute or pay for things that you would normally pay for and already budgeted for and is allowed. It's looking for those dollars, sort of like the gap. Because of this crisis, but for this crisis, you wouldn't be expending dollars in that manner. So those are the places that we're looking. I can't tell you what decision to make. That is a local district decision on how you do those staffing. But that will help us kind of look at our expectations of what it goes forward. I will also say that as we identify gaps in funding, we will continue to advocate both at the state and federal level through programs or through appropriations to either get waivers or additional fundings on behalf of local school districts.
Robin, on the CARES Act, we just got word that the House has passed it, so it's now passed both houses of Congress, and it's awaiting the president's signature.
That's great.
And I would just add to that, we're tentatively planning a superintendent webinar. That one would probably just focus on funding and budget issues, maybe as early as the end of next week. And then we're going to have a superintendent webinar on Tuesday at, Tony, do you know what?
About the same time, 2 o'clock.
About probably around 2 o'clock Tuesday, and that is going to be a special superintendent webinar on special education issues.
So kind of related with Senate Bill 177, there's a question, actually 2 questions, wondering if it gives districts considerable flexibility with evaluations. So, for example, if a teacher only received 1 formative observation and the plan requires 2, can the summative be based on the available evidence?
Senate Bill 177 provided the flexibility to school districts to amend their certified evaluation plan. Those plans look different in every school district because every school district has the flexibility to adopt a different type of plan. So the school districts now have the ability to amend that plan as a result of COVID-19. They need to look individually to their CEPs and make amendments as necessary.
With this virus ramping up, should we consider feeding once or twice per week and just providing enough meals for the entire week?
I think that involves, while we've been granted a lot of flexibility under USDA, I still think there are many rules that we have to follow, so I will defer to Robin on that question.
So right now, districts can go to fewer days and do those meals accordingly. I think we even have had one district asking to deliver all meals in one trip, and that is permissible provided you comply with all the other parts of the program that have not been waived as yet. I do encourage districts to think, because this will be going on for a while, about anything that helps you sustain a model. As we roll along and as more people are affected by the virus, you may have fewer people that are available. And so coming up with a very sustainable plan is really important. I will say, as you deliver, if you go to a fewer days, right now, at least as it is, and we're trying to get further guidance on this, is you still have to provide unitized meals, meaning by portion. So my example is, you can't send a big box of Cheerios and say, let this last for 5 days. You still have to do unitized portions of your meals.
Do you have any updates on how we handle CTE certifications such as diesel and CNA?
David Horseman, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. We're in the process right now of reviewing all of these. Obviously, since they're not for accountability any longer with that waiver, we do realize that we have groups of students that utilize their industry certifications to enter the workplace. So right now, we're trying to evaluate how that might be handled. We're getting some relief from some of the online testing, but what we're saying is we don't condone non-proctored tests, but if the employer, for example, NCCER is a national group, and in Western Kentucky, a lot of employers use that, and they're offering to give it to students for free, that would be something that they would be allowed to do. And obviously, if we get back in the buildings, there's options for, if we can have teachers and resources available to do it, we will. But right now, it's just too early to call on everything. So we're still working with it.
Under the new COVID unemployment guidelines, can retired teachers who are actively drawing a KTRS retirement sign up for and receive unemployment benefits?
I don't know.
Well, we don't know the answer to that. I'm looking around. I think that's a unemployment / KTRS issue. We can flag that, Tony, to reach out to those agencies and post that answer on the Q&A document.
Okay. What flexibility may be offered regarding current grant funding, i.e. Frisky, 21st Century, and completing expenditures prior to the end of the fiscal year?
For those that we have the authority in the Kentucky Department of Education over state grants, we'll be issuing guidance on that. So if you have received funding through the state on any of those large line items or formulary, we will be sending guidance on that. I think we do have to remember, at least at this point in time, the fiscal year will end on June 30th, and so we may have to seek additional guidance from the Office of the State Budget Director on that.
Hi, this is Kelly. I'd also like to comment on that regarding federal dollars. I have reached out to Ed and our contact there to see about grants like Title I, 21st Century, if there's going to be any extension on funds that have to be spent by September 30th. So once we receive that guidance, we will definitely share that out with you all.
Okay. All right, the next question is, if we go back to school within the 2 weeks after spring break, should we require a mandatory self-isolation for any students who travel for spring break?
Hopefully, you will be able to encourage all students and families not to travel for spring break, as the governor is encouraging that to happen. Todd, do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's partially a public health question that we may need to follow up with the Department of Public Health to get an answer on, to see what their recommendations are. But most school districts who have adopted kind of uniform school policies already have policies. I can't recall the number off the top of my head, but there's a policy in there that allows school districts to deal with situations where students may present at school with health conditions that are highly contagious, and how to deal with those situations. So we need some advice and input from the medical experts at the Department of Public Health, and then encourage school districts to follow their policies in that regard.
And that'll be a nice problem to have, meaning that we would be back in school, I think, based on the question. That was about a student, correct?
Yeah, that was if students went on, if they were back in session and students went to spring break.
That'd be a great problem to have, meaning we'd be back in school. But we will definitely, if that situation occurs, we'll be obviously encourage you to continue to work through your public health there locally, and then we can, if that arises, get some guidance out here from the state level as well.
Our districts that just started NTI due to COVID-19, do they have 30 days in addition to the first 10 that they just completed?
David and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have 30 days, correct, or do they have 40?
They have 40 because, Kevin, you basically gave them the 30 was under this emergency. So unless they had used their 10, I guess that would be the case, but they get to keep the 10 they already, whatever they had left, plus the 30 that you've given them.
So the moral to the
Does that
story
make
is you're
sense?
gonna, thank you, David. The moral of the story is you're gonna have as many NTI days as you need.
Yeah.
We'll continue. We have the authority under Senate Bill 177 to continue to grant those. We just granted 30 to kind of get us through the first 6-week period. And as we've said earlier and have said before, we were going to have to constantly reevaluate what it looks like for everyone, what educational services look like if we get into around the first part of May, and if things change. And so we'll have to be prepared to possibly change, but we also want to make sure we're prepared to continue providing services if possible. Definitely want to try to hit the 1,062, but we also know that this is something that it changes and evolves every day.
Our local health experts have advised nurses not to come in and take temperatures of those working with food service. Has KDE received guidance from state health officials on this being a best practice?
We actually had a nurses and health coordinators call earlier this week, and we talked about the taking of temperatures. I'll circle back with the guidance that was provided. I can't remember right off the top of my head if that came directly from public health and sometimes local health departments are not completely in sync with their advice. So let me follow up with that and make sure that we're getting it from the Frankfort local public health.
If we are delivering food to students and our district is not listed on the COVID feed part of the KDE website, how do we get it listed? I believe they just want to be listed in the site, so I'd contact.
You can contact either Lauren Moore or Tim Cooper in the Division of School and Community Nutrition, and they'll make sure you get added. And your food service director should know how to get a hold of them, or we can, if you can go out onto our website on the webpage for School and Community Nutrition, their information is posted.
And I hope that is a district that where we were not having service. So if that's the case, you don't need to say, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. If it's not, I'll be reaching out to that district. So
I think I think this is another stop that they just want to make sure that it's listed on.
Oh,
So.
just another site, an additional
Another site, yeah, we still have that one district, so. Do we have any guidance on early graduate testing? And I think this question was addressed in the FAQ, but we can go ahead and maybe talk about it here. Early graduate testing, EG testing? I'm not sure who's.
Yeah, I can talk about, we talked about that a little bit already. This is the early graduate program we talked about earlier. That is a competency based. So actually Rhonda Sims and David Horseman and I are working with legal on what we can do. Currently, early graduation, not for hardship, but the actual program for advanced students to demonstrate competency to start college early and have additional funds is based on passing the four currently formerly used EOCs, that is by paper and pencil only, and meeting all ACT benchmarks. And so we are talking through different options that are safe for students but fair, and we have not made a final decision on that. We're working through the options, and we'll let you know just as soon as we can. This will be a piece also that we take forward to just recommendations on the task force to make sure we're not overlooking anything, and that we don't have any unintended consequences. So that is in discussion, and we'll get back with you as soon as we can. But we have looked at our numbers. We know who's requested the exams, even down to the county and the school. And so we're looking at different options.
Is base SEEK going to be flatlined again for the next 2 years at $4,000? If so, shouldn't we be talking to our legislators about the negative impacts of this?
Well, obviously, the budget bill hasn't passed yet, and so there are discussions. I think the General Assembly right now is grappling with building a budget based upon revenue projections before, obviously, this crisis hit. So at this point in time, we don't know what the base seek will look like. I will continue to tell you that if it comes to a flat line, we will continue to explore other funding opportunities to try to help offset, kind of the crisis that you're in. But at this point in time, we won't know what that looks like until the budget bill is actually finalized.
Meeting the 1,062-hour requirement has been discussed, but the requirement of 170 days has not been mentioned. Has that been discussed as a possibility to be waived by the General Assembly?
The General Assembly in Senate Bill 177, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, says the goal is to reach 1,062 instructional hours on or before June 12th, 2020, and for districts to maximize educational instruction, I believe were the terms, as much as possible, then gave the commissioner the authority to provide relief if districts were unable to maximize educational instruction by that time in meeting the 1062. So I believe the day requirement is not included in 177. We're completely going to hours, the 1062, as a goal to meet for this school year.
Another question on the SEEK. If we have to use 1819 SEEK numbers, will we be penalized with the higher local effort amounts from increased property assessment? This will be absolutely devastating to our district.
We are in conversations with the Department of Revenue right now about property assessments, so we'll have to circle back on that as well. But that is on our radar, and we're talking to the Department of Revenue.
Been receiving information about tracking NTI through Infinite Campus. Is this required in addition to current requirements shared by Dr. Cook for NTI participation requirements?
Kevin, can I just quickly respond?
Sure.
Yeah, no, this is the feature that has been added by IC. It is an optional feature. Some districts are already excited about it because it allows them to do their internal kind of checking on students. It's nothing that we're going to collect from you comes out of IC. So that's the answer is no, it is not required. It's an option.
Is there anything that can be done from a state level in regards to student trips that have been canceled, costing families as much as $1,000 if they can't use a voucher?
At this time, no. However, we're still evaluating the relief that we're getting from the federal government. There was some. I'm not saying that would in any way be covered, but I'm just saying that in no way want to make a promise that it's covered. But we're still evaluating to what extent are any type of expenses incurred by school districts covered under any relief packages being passed. So at this point, no. The answer to that is no. Robin, do you or Todd have any thing to add to that?
No.
Will there be a waiver to Perkins grant funds extending the date for expenditure past June 30th of this year?
David?
I'll answer that the same as Kelly Foster did for her title programs. Right now, we're waiting to hear back from the feds on what decisions they've made. They told us last week in a meeting, US Ed that I deal with, that person said it would be 2 weeks before they answered us.
Kind of another question in regards to what grades are going to look like for NTI, especially at the high school level. Not necessarily the local level with grading, but they're really concerned in terms of KEYS money and how this is going to impact scholarships for students.
Tony, this is the same one we've answered earlier twice about, I will be talking to Kia early, actually I'm supposed to be talking to them this afternoon. I'll have an answer early next week. We are aware of the issue, especially it is a local decision, and so we'll have some guidance next week on that.
Should we allow every employee to work from home except for food service and custodians to decrease the people in the district?
Yes, you're asking my opinion. This is not a directive, but it is a strong opinion, and the governor has also indicated, and he's led on this, that if it is possible for your employees to work remotely, and he is saying this to government as well as the private sector, then you should allow them to work remotely. When you do that, that gives extra comfort, or it should give extra comfort to the folks who do have to come in to do their jobs, meaning that if you have 20 teachers in a building and they can all telecommute to do NTI, that's 20 less hands touching the doorknob to get in the school. And so you're decreasing your building load, you're decreasing the risk of contact, and therefore if you have 5 food service workers there and 2 janitorial staff, that makes the environment better for them.
What is the protocol for staff if another staff member is waiting to be tested? Do other staff members have to isolate while one waits for a test and the results?
That is generally guidance that's being given, and it has happened a little in some districts already, being given by your local health departments to assist you on that, because they are best equipped to guide you. They know the situation there locally, know the person most likely that's being tested or quarantined, and they can advise you as to how you should handle other employees. A good example of that, there was a letter issued, I believe it was yesterday, by Owensboro Independent about this very issue or similar issue, and the district communicated with their local health department. They produced a wonderful letter to the community about an employee that had tested, and gave some reassurance and guidance to families. So I think if we haven't already, and if we get the permission of the district to post that, that would be very helpful for districts to use as an example if that happens in their district. So Tony, if you can make a note of that.
Will do. Next question is just in regards to the distancing with bus stops and food delivery. Should they, in terms of delivering the food, and are they allowed to continue to have the bus stops with the food delivery?
They can still have the bus stops, but everything that you do, no matter whether you're delivering food, delivering instruction, delivering NTI packets, cleaning your building, no matter what you're talking about, you should be practicing social distancing. So everything you do should be around social distancing. Logistically, in some cases, that's a little more challenging, but everything that you can do to keep conducting yourself under that manner makes everyone safer.
A couple of districts have noted that the 30 additional NTI days for them ends on May 1st. They would need an additional 8 more days to reach the 1,062 hours. What would they do if they cannot bring the kids back to school?
Let's just say that happens, and you hit your 30 days on May 1st, but you said, well, you need 8 more days?
They would need 8 more days.
8 more days. And let's just say the situation with the virus is about like it is now. It's just kind of remained static, but we're still under all the recommendations and the healthy at home advice. Then we would most likely we will grant you the additional days to get to 1062. However, if things change and we start having trouble delivering NTI services for one reason or another, or we're having fatigue or other things that we're all going to be talking about, and the task force will be talking about, and I know you're going to be talking about in your co-ops, we're going to evaluate that, and we're going to we'll make a determination later on if the situation changes. But if the situation were as it is today with the level of cases today, but we were still under all these restrictions, then I believe we would be granting you additional NTI days, and you would finish out the school year and get your 1062 around probably May 12th or so, 10th or 12th.
How will dual credit be affected to the schools closed due to the schools being closed? Dual credit.
And I think I'll defer to Dr. Ellis on that. or David.
It'd be
Yeah,
David on.
Okay, today, as I said, CPE was meeting with some of the colleges, and I think we had other people from our office there as well. There's a lot of issues around it that they're grappling with, and they had another meeting with universities. The guidance we're giving now is on dual credit. Be working with the institution directly to see where they're asking you, what they're asking you to do. The one thing we caution, as I said earlier, is about pass fail. KCTCS are, as a system, are going to be assigning grades as best they can. And there may be some with labs that there may be, as in the past, if it's an incomplete or partially incomplete, they're looking at a lot of different options for them to be able to get their lab work done. But the main thing is to be focused with the institution you're dealing with, especially on assigning those grades, because there's no guarantee that a pass-fail might be accepted at the institution you are working with, but it may not transfer.
Okay. This is going to be a special education question, so I think if Greta's on the line, how will special education related services be provided to avoid violating student IEPs?
As we've said previously in discussions around specially designed instruction, it's going to be the same type of situation with related services. It's about trying to provide equity and ensuring that students have the most appropriate and comparable services that they can receive currently. The advice that I would give to districts would be to document all of the services, have really good data systems with ongoing progress monitoring, so that when we get on the other side of this, the ARC teams can convene and determine if students have made reasonable progress in light of this situation, or if they've missed services and compensatory education is required.
Okay, I'm going to go through some of these other ones.
I have a question here that came in on text about, I think, backing up to the answer we gave about folks with 40 NTI days. Whether you have 40 or whether you have 30, right, the expectation is that everybody be putting in, beginning March 16th, starting to put in 6 weeks of, or 30 days of NTI instruction. Some districts won't begin NTI instruction until April, around the 1st of April, because they're new and they're starting, trying to get things in place. And so we will obviously have to give them some additional days. We may have to give many of you additional days, but right now everybody has 30 to use from March 16th. Some of you, though, who have been doing NTI a long time have already had the first 10, and you've utilized many of those this year due to, we had some winter weather and flu, so you may have 9 before March 16th, and now you're rolling in on doing 30 more.
Can we change our Infinite Campus IC calendars to reflect the instructional minutes in our NTI plans? Our schools are doing more time each day than our normal schedule due to not having recess. So they want to change, know if they can change their instructional minutes in Infinite Campus.
Kelly, do you have a?
I don't think that's what the NTI
I think that's a
application
Robin
anticipates.
question.
No, I think that is whatever is in your NTI plan. Your NTI plan is reflective of the minutes that you would have as a typical school day.
But I think the question is, can they go in and change their school calendar now to adjust the minutes for each day?
The instructional minutes, yes. Can they change their instructional minutes during the day?
They're planning on providing more NTI during the same day.
I guess they would need to.
I think we
I think
just-
that they need to understand that SB 177 has provided the commissioner with flexibility and authority to waive hours to the extent that he needs to, and it also requires the department to report to the Interim Joint Committee on Education how school districts meet that 1,062-hour requirement, and the districts who weren't able to meet it and who needed a waiver. And that's okay if a district does need a waiver, but we need to be very uniform about the way those number of hours are recorded, so they're all recorded accurately and uniformly among school districts.
I think a lot of these other questions are similar to ones that we've already had, so unless we.
While you're looking, I will say none of you mentioned the emergency FMLA leave, and I'm glad you didn't, because we don't really have a lot of answers for you right now on that. And I'm not trying to gin up a question here, but I just saw an email, KSBA, John Fogel, they have been researching that issue, and I think an email went out to board council about the federal FMLA issue and how it may or may not apply to school district employees. So just know that they are working, and we want to thank KSBA for working on that and other issues as well.
There's a kind of more of a comment here, and I think you can reflect a little bit more about the preparation of NTI work. Just a suggestion, if they can give as much advance notice as possible on having teachers produce days 21 through 30 in NTI, that would be great, because it takes a while to design, copy paper packets, and get it out to students. I think that speaks to what you had mentioned about being prepared for 6 weeks of, you'd want to reflect a little bit on that.
I'm sorry, I'm zoned out.
Telling them to be prepared with how many weeks of NTI material.
Yes, we want you to be preparing now for 6 weeks of NTI instruction, and as grueling as that is, and we realize that, I understand that there. I was on a call today with the other commissioners from the southern states, and that call was convened by the Southern Regional Education Board. They're grappling with the same thing. We're talking to them to see how they're handling it. It's a heavy lift, even though we have, and of course, we always think we do things better here in Kentucky, and I think we're right most of the time. But other states have done some things similar to NTI, but we have a lot of experience with it, and so that is, I think, serving us well. However, as I've said, that's still a lift to do 6 weeks, but at least if the circumstances remain the same, I believe we owe that at least 6 weeks of that type of instruction. That does get us to, for most districts, to around May 1st, and then we're going to reevaluate it. And we're going to reevaluate before we get to May 1st, because if we think we need additional weeks after the 6th, if things are steady, but we're still in this situation, and we think we can do a 7th or an 8th week, we're not gonna wait until May 1st to tell you that. You know, we're gonna be talking about this all the month of April, and this thing will evolve, and we'll give you plenty, just like you have heads up now to prepare for the 6 weeks. You'll have a heads up if you have to prepare for one more week or a few more days. So there are a lot of things we don't have answers for, and that's okay. I know you have the same situation and the issues you're dealing with in your communities, but I can just pledge to you that we're going to evaluate things on a day-to-day basis, and we're going to do what's in the best interest of Kentucky's kids and school districts.
In relating to back to special education, they understand the timelines, but what about evaluations since students cannot be tested without face-to-face meetings?
Those are situations that are just beyond our control. There's guidance that I provided to all directors of special education that came from the Office of Special Education Programs at USED that goes through some of those situations. And one of the examples that they provided was the initial evaluation. We understand that you may have consent that's already been obtained, but you're going to be unable to have the eligibility meeting within the 60-day timeline. What I would recommend in following along with that guidance would be to contact the parents, make sure you have the meeting, have the just lay the facts on the table. There's not a lot that you can do about it. Make sure that both parties agree and understand But at the end of the day, districts are still going to miss their timelines. One of the things that I've shared with your directors of special education in a previous call with them is that as we move forward from my office, we know that, right? So we're not going to be out there monitoring your files for compliance of timelines during this time. What we will be looking at was, did you make a good faith effort to communicate with parents, educate children, and provide faith? And then we will work through those specific situations. A person asked the question, if we do miss the timeline, what's the recourse for that? What's the corrective action plan? And I have shared with directors of special education, there is no corrective action plan for that specific situation. If you missed a timeline simply because of COVID-19 and the inability to assess students, then we simply put that down. That's the justification. And as a result, we know that the state's also going to be out of compliance with some of our indicators, but it is what it is, to be frank.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions that have come in regards to concerns over an unreliable supply chain. So we've experienced, even with long-term and trusted vendors, less than reliable supply chain function. Until more is known about the full impact of this virus across the country, custodial supplies will be unpredictable at best. This could even, in theory, impact supplies and availability into the start of next year. How would we go about doing this if we came back still this year?
Robin?
That's very possible. Just like local districts, the state has those issues as well. And so we stay in close contact with our state procurement services here at the Finance Cabinet. I would encourage you, if you haven't already explored anything that might be available on state contracts, you have access to those in addition to if you work through your cooperatives or do your own local purchasing. So that might be an avenue that you could explore. And you're right, this is continuing to evolve, and depending on what kind of supplies reduce, then we'll have to make decisions based upon what we know at that time. I know we're also seeing this kind of in the school and community nutrition area, where you can't always get access to certain things. And again, school and community nutrition has some good guidance out on their website of as far as waiving certain things, certain components, all those things that they're thinking about as well, because you may not always have access to the same things you've had in the past. Additionally, as far as just delivery of those things, you may want to go to more shelf-stable type of commodities instead of what you've used in the past. Again, this is about thinking and working with what you have, not what you always had in the past. So we'll continue to be flexible, and we do want to hear that. If you're running into problems about securing certain supplies, we'd like to hear that so that we can advance that conversation with others here at the Commonwealth.
As a follow-up to that is trying to obtain additional PPE if larger scale disinfecting of buildings needs to occur, perhaps if there's a confirmed case of COVID-19. CDC protocols for disinfecting recommend PPE that we simply cannot obtain. Things like gowns, disposable coveralls, and masks are being fully allocated to the medical field. These are the same items that are being listed when a positive case occurs in a building, and we simply can't get these items right now, and there's no estimates provided for obtaining those. So again, another concern that they just want to raise.
A very valid concern. I would continue to encourage them to reach out to their local health departments, especially if they have a situation where someone has been diagnosed and has been in their building, because they will help them walk through that, as well as actions that they need to take after that has been discovered.
One more.
And I've got an announcement too, a good announcement, so.
Okay. Can we use emergency days to pay our custodial staff if we close down during spring break to give them a breather and make sure that they can self-isolate themselves, and if and they could be on call to come in if needed? So the question is, can they use emergency days to pay custodial staff if we close down during spring break to give them a break?
a break.
Yes, so
Just
that
a-
they, yes.
We can look into that question. SB 177 provided some additional emergency days granted to school district employees. I think all school districts have policies on how those days are to be utilized, so they need to take a look at their school district policies for the use of emergency days. But I'm happy to take a look at that question and provide some additional guidance on the use of emergency days. I think the KSBA, Kentucky School Boards Association, also issued some guidance to school districts on this topic on how they can use those additional emergency days if their board approves it. SB 177 did not require that to be the case, but provided it in a permissible manner for the local board to approve granting additional emergency days.
Yeah, that's in section 4 of Senate Bill 177. You might want to take a look at that along with your local board attorney. All these questions are related to emergency leave time and any of your individual employee relations, because you're wearing somewhat of your HR hat as well as wearing your hat for being the superintendent of a local school district. So I would encourage you to work with your HR and your local board attorney as you look at Senate Bill 177, as well as any relief that may be provided under the federal acts that have already been discussed.
And the answer to that question is also dependent on kind of facts there at the local level. Were the custodians, was that in their contract, or can that be, those days just be, if you wanted them to have a break, just be added on at the end of the year to provide services and not needing emergency days? All that could factor into that. I just want to make sure everybody understands, while we have the ability to add emergency days, which we will need to get some employees most likely where we need them to be, we want to make sure, and I know you all are doing this already because I hear how the creative ways you're doing it. We want to act in good faith to try to have every employee provide services one way or another between now to get through their contracts and June 30th. And as an example, KEA is offering an electronic platform for paraprofessionals to have PD that, if approved by their supervisor, could, if approved by your district, provide them a day of PD that would count as a contract day, for an example. So, and I know there's a lot of platforms like that out there. And I also know there's only so much PD we can do to count for days. But all kinds of options like that we're looking at, and I know you're looking at, and we want to make sure we're communicating that from co-op to co-op and district to district, and that's one of the reasons for having the website. The good news that I have is that I've been informed that we have had every child in Kentucky has been covered by every child in Kentucky is covered by some type of food service. So while the area we were concerned about was not in summer feeding, they have in fact been partnering with other organizations and are providing food, and my guess is they're doing some of that at their own expense, which is very admirable. So we are serving all kids in Kentucky based on the information that we have. So I want to thank you all for that. That's a huge effort, whether you're doing summer feeding, whether you're working with other organizations. If you continue to have questions about that, or those of you that aren't on summer feeding but want to know more about it, if you're doing more local solutions, feel free to contact Lauren Moore here at the department.
And when I looked yesterday, I think we're over 2,000 feeding site locations in the state. So that's just really remarkable to show how many sites that we have across the Commonwealth. And again, on our site, you can log in and see on the county where every site is that's been approved. There's also been just a clarification. Some people are referring to the May 1st. Everybody refers to May 1st. They just want to make sure that it is true that as of today, school has just been recommended to be off through the 20th, correct?
That is correct. I probably shouldn't have been using the May 1st deadline, the date, other than it's Derby Eve. I was born on Derby Eve, so it's a big date for me. But May 1st was the date we could get to 6 weeks of NTI within a 7-week period from March 16th, when all this started with school closure. And so 6 weeks being kind of a general period of time in school, in the school world. That's why we were using the May 1st period. And initially, we thought, okay, by May 1st, things would obviously kind of be back to normal, and that's what we had hoped back a few weeks ago. And so that's why May 1st was being used. Let's try to get to May 1st using 6 weeks of non-traditional instruction if we don't go back before then. So that's May 1st is not really a magic number other than for what I just said, but we are closed until April 20th. And then we continue to have conversations with the governor, and he's obviously being advised by our experts in the Kentucky Department of Public Health. And he understands the need to plan, and so if there is an extension beyond April 20th, you can be sure that he will let us know in time. So.
Okay. I just want to go back to a question that we had received just a little bit earlier in regards to, because I can't tell where the question came in from, but if whoever asked the question about the local health experts advising nurses not to come in and take temperatures of those working with food service, if you can just shoot me an email on that. You all have my contact information. We are going to work on getting some guidance for you from the state health department on that. I just don't have a way to follow up with you. So if you can send me an email, it's Tony, toni.tatman, Tatman, at education.ky.gov, and we will work to get you a response for that. Going back to additional questions, let me see. Many districts utilize the elderly population as bus drivers and monitors. This will be the most at risk for COVID-19, and many may not be able to return in 6 weeks. This is going to present another problem for districts to be able to provide services.
We realize that. Our folks here are on, if not daily, several times a week, are in contact with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, for example, the regional office. One of the questions that I asked them to ask USDA is we need USDA to be thinking ahead to what happens if the folks that traditionally prepare food in our cafeterias are unable for whatever reason to continue doing that. Is there flexibility within the regulations if you're in summer feeding to have community volunteers to come in, for example? And so we're looking at all of those types of scenarios. We understand there could be a problem in the future with personnel and having the right numbers to get there. And the governor's office also understands that. But as we are right now, to the extent you can still staff up your food service, that's what we want you to do. And we also received a question from a superintendent on email about we need to make sure here at the department we understand the difference between the intentional design of NTI versus the practical application during a global pandemic / national emergency. I completely agree with you. NTI was designed to get us through a bad winter or a few days off here or there, and then you come back for a day, and then maybe another snowstorm rolls in and you're off for 3 more, but you always have a reset at some period to come back in the classroom. We know that's not happening, can't happen now. We know that's a challenge. It's a challenge because we can't deliver NTI completely virtually because we don't have complete or have access for every child, and that's an additional burden on staff to prepare packets. How do you deliver the packets? Is it the same level of instruction and guidance if you're not doing it virtually? We realize all of those are issues. We also understand, and that's one reason we're saying try to get through the first 6 weeks, because can we get to a 7th week because of the very issue that this superintendent raised. So we understand that, but we're also trying to balance that with making sure students have the activity and have the instruction during a time where they can't do anything else. And I know you all are doing a really good job of that right now, and but that will continue to evolve, and we'll continue to evaluate the effectiveness and ability for us to continue doing NTI as we move through this.
Can our school-based health clinics with nurse practitioners, et cetera, remain open during the closing to help reduce burden on other medical providers?
We had heard just anecdotally that school nurses were continuing to come in and trying to provide services that were permitted in their scope of practice and is recommended by public health. I don't have data on how much we're doing that. I know that was the desire of the school nurses to try to do that. So I think it is permitted based upon, obviously, coordination with your local health department.
All right, I think that is it. Let me just, if you have another comment or two, I'm going to scroll through here just to make sure that I have not missed anything.
Tony, this is Robin Kenny. I know in one of our prior conversations with superintendents, there was a question about substitute teachers and unemployment insurance. And I apologize, I can't remember who asked that question, but I do know that was a question that was raised. We have reached out to the cabinet who provides the support for unemployment insurance. And the governor has announced in his press conference that substitute teachers will be eligible to apply for unemployment insurance benefits. Of course, as I was having that conversation, I had lots of questions about what that looked like and what that exactly meant. But I would encourage you to, for substitute teachers, to direct them to unemployment insurance. They have, as with many unemployment insurance benefits, set up a site that you can go to as well as call in, and they are encouraging people to apply for UI benefits according to the first letter of their last name to try to help manage the influx, the large influx of applicants right now. So as your substitutes do apply for that, I would encourage them to be patient because it's going to take some patience to get through that. But I just wanted to share with you that that is available. The other part of that question was related to local school districts and the cost for that for local school districts. Again, based upon guidance we've received from the cabinet, the general fund is going to take care of that cost, and so local districts do not have to worry about that for their substitute teachers.
Okay. All right. I think that wraps it up for questions. And I just wanted to reiterate what I had said earlier about the hashtagging of the NTI work. It's going to be really important as we move forward with this journey. I guess we can call it a journey. To really reach out and share with everyone and each other the different ideas and the creativity that we have seen so far, just as we're going into week 2 for many of our districts. And some of our larger districts haven't even started the work yet. So we're very excited to see what they're going to be doing in addition to what lies for week 3 and 4. So please use the hashtags, reach out to each other, and share with us the work that you're doing, because we want to do what we can do to promote what you're doing as well.
And related to that, I just want to say to you all that, it's okay to get discouraged every now and then. And I know there are things out there to be discouraged about, and I get discouraged. And I will look to these, there have been days that I've looked to social media and some of these things you're posting that just really snaps me out of that because of what's going on in local districts. So thank you for that. You all are doing all the work and at the local level to help kids and families through this, and we appreciate that. Feel free to continue to send us questions. There may have been a few that you emailed to me that I didn't get to. I apologize. We'll make sure we either address those on the next one or put them in the Q&A. And we will plan on having a special superintendent's webinar on Tuesday related to special ed only. Greta Hilton will be giving you an update, and then we'll take questions. And then when we have enough information and some solid information on both federal funding and state funding related to this, we'll be doing another webinar. You can count on at least one webinar from us every week through this. So thank you again for all you're doing, and feel free to reach out to us with your continued questions and concerns. Thank you.